if you say, what are the biggest problems I need to solve? Okay. And you start with, oh, is it targeting or is it loyalty or what is it? Right. And then you're saying, okay, what are the kind of the KPIs that are really important? Well, what's the data that I need within it? And then you get to, last of all, the technology that provides the data, that provides the answer to the biggest questions that you have as a marketeer. Whereas I think too many people start at the wrong place.
Hi, I'm Andy Murray. Welcome to It's a Customer's World podcast. Now more than ever, retailers and brands are accelerating their quest to be more customer-centric. But to be truly customer-centric, it requires both a shift in mindset and ways of working, not just in marketing, but in all parts of the organization. In this podcast series, I'll be talking with practitioners, thought leaders, and scholars to hear their thoughts on what it takes to be a leader in today's customer-centric world. Hello, everyone, and welcome to It's a Customer's World podcast. Marketing organizations are under significant pressure today to help drive growth for their companies and also build sustainable brands, and do that in the context of increasing complexity. To be effective, you have to be firing on all four cylinders. To talk about these challenges, I sat down with Simon Francis, Executive Chairman of Flock and Associates. Simon has extensive experience in marketing transformation. Over his career, he has run creative, media, digital, branded content, and has also been CEO of EMEA for Saatchi & Saatchi and Aegis Media. He's also held senior positions at OMD, Leo Burnett, Mindshare, and Zenith Optimedia. In 2013, Simon founded Flock and Associates to help marketers through transformation on many different levels. Over the last decade, Flock has worked with some of the biggest global brands, including Amazon, Ford, Shell, Toyota, McDonald's, Asda, and many more. Simon and I covered four big areas marketers need to address when driving change: people, processes, partnerships, and procurement. One of the things I like about how Simon approaches transformation and his wise advice is to be clear about the problem you're trying to solve and what kind of customer experience you're wanting to see as an outcome of any transformation work. I hope you'll enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Hello, Simon, and welcome to the program, my friend. It's so good to have a Brit join us from London. How's the weather in London today? Is the sun shining?
Well, yes, it is. The sun is shining both physically and sort of more emotionally, if you know what I mean. Yeah, it's been a good day.
Well, after 4 years in the UK, I didn't realize until I got there how the weather is almost every part of every conversation, right? So it's only fitting that we start this with the weather.
Yeah, absolutely right. But then you were up north where the weather's a bit more extreme. So down south is always sunny.
Yeah, that's why we tended to go to London on the weekends. Outside of there was only so much sheep and rock walls we could look at. Uh, that far north. So let's get started. You've been helping big brands and retailers transform their marketing organizations at Flock for now 10 years. So first of all, congrats on your entrepreneurial journey. And before we start talking about marketing and transformation, take me back to that moment 10 years ago when you started this journey. What were you thinking and feeling at the time? And did you envision it looking like it does today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the reason why I set the business up was, that just the world was getting much more complicated. There's the what of marketing and the how of marketing. The what of marketing is, what's my insight? What's my idea? What's my media strategy? And that's hard, but it hadn't got any harder. The how of marketing had got just incredibly harder. How do I get the right people? How do I organize them? How do I get everyone to work together? How do I get the right agencies and stuff? And so I saw an opportunity in that 10 years ago. And surprisingly, the business plans almost kind of worked out. As
Yeah.
you see, you rock at these things, you never really know. But it's been a privilege to work with some great brands and great people to genuinely transform their marketing. And that's what Flock Associates, my company does.
Well, you're obviously doing something right. 95% of startups fail after the first year, so you've cut through all of those barriers, and it's been quite impressive to watch you build this over the last 10. Yeah, I'm curious as to what you're seeing today in terms of the challenges marketers face as compared to what you saw in the past when you were starting out 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously some key sort of just general business trends that follow through. You know, the globalization,
Hmm.
the drive of technology transforming sort of things. I think they're all well sort of understood. I think really for marketeers and the CMO is their changing role in the board has been a big difference. I've got to be honest. I say that the level of talent in the industry as a whole, both on the advertiser and on the agency side, has changed, and I'm afraid I don't see it as for the better.
Hmm.
So there's some of the sort of macro trends that you would see, and then the ones that of course, you talk about, you know, massive changes through both social and influencer sort of marketing, and now the onrushing wave of sort of retail sort
Yeah.
of media, interspersed with economic challenges, COVID, and the rest of them along the way. So never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment for sure. I hear a lot of questions in the industry still around things like what's the best way to organize or deal with X, Y, or Z? So, for example, how much should we be doing performance marketing versus brand marketing, or where should retail media network accountability sit in the organization? Or is it in-housing better than partnering? Uh, I don't know why, but we tend to want to look for those pat answers. But my experience has been it depends. It depends on culture, categories you're competing in, your heritage. And I imagine the work you guys do is a more of an alchemist or a forensic scientist to try to figure out what's best for each company versus pure consultant. I mean, do you feel like there is these pat answers? It's kind of a softball question, but I mean, it
No.
feels like there's a lot of variables and yet we want to find the single best answer for everybody.
Yeah, you know, I'll be blunt about it. There are lots of other sorts of consultancies who maybe don't understand marketing as well, who say, here's a model, right? You've got to in-house, or you got to in-house media, or you got to do a retail network, or, you know,
Hmm.
and they have these models that they tout around and they drop on any company, any culture, any style of organization. Ours, because we are marketeers, consulting to marketeers, we believe in the power of the consumer. So we'll look at what does the consumer need in 3 years' time? You know, what do they need of this brand? What do they need from this sort of business? And then we figure out where the company is now and then fill the gaps. And quite often that will be, okay, what skills are required first and foremost, right? How are you going to effectively organize those skills? How are you going to sort of train and nurture those skills? What are the processes that are going to make those teams efficient and effective? And that includes the power of the data and the technology that they would need. And often what some other consultancies forget is the agency resources. You know, they add huge value to marketing, always have, always will do. Their role is changing. But what is the role of the agencies? So we start from a very purist stance, really, which is to organize marketing around the needs of the consumer, rather than against a pat answer or an off the peg model, or, you know, something that serves our business or a technology that we've got to sell. That's not the way we work.
Well, I know from my own experience, I think when I got into ASDA 2016 and trying to create a vision and move things forward, one of the pieces of data I had was about 30. If you look at the total ecosystem of marketing that we were doing, probably only 30% of the total FTEs were, inside the company. And so to take on change without really understanding the total ecosystem of external partners is too limiting because it wouldn't
Yeah.
work. And I think probably the best decision we made back then was to engage you guys to come in and help sort it out and get our in-house in order first before we started looking at agencies and other partners. Uh,
Yeah.
and you look at your business and what Flock does really as I've experienced it and how you talk about it under four pillars. And I want to walk through those pillars and talk about that. And it's people, partners, procurement, and process. And it seems like all four of those are going through a lot of change and have some real challenges today. But before I ask about the underneath each one of those four, I found it curious you didn't have digital and technology as a pillar. Is that because it's foundational throughout, or it's something you don't look at?
No, it's 100% ingrained in every aspect of everything that we do, along with sustainability and diversity and inclusion, right? You just cannot talk about agencies without talking about technology and data. It doesn't matter what sort of agency it is, technology and data will play a role. As soon as you start talking about processes, you're talking about technology, the workflow tools and the enablement tools that power processes. But equally, sustainability, diversity, and inclusion runs through every part of our work, whether it's about people, whether it's about partners, whether it's about procurement. It's such a fundamental underpinning from all of our work. So we don't call it out as a separate service because we don't really believe in it being siloed from the other component parts of our business. And most oftentimes, we have all four of those services working together as one. We only broke them out as four to make us easy to shop. Simply,
Yeah.
people know, oh, you do marketing capabilities, and people, so we call it out.
When you look at people, let's start there, in the right roles, getting people in the right roles. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the culture of the company you're working with affects that, because culture is so important. But how do you get into the cultural element in addition to looking at job specs and who should be sitting where?
Yeah, culture trumps all. Not, I mean, that's a bland statement, but pretty much, right? I
Mm,
could assemble the most talented bunch of people in my organization, but without a culture that's inclusive, that can get the best of them, that genuinely puts excellence at the fore, I wouldn't have a very good business, right?
right.
So before anyone, I mean, again, some people rush to org design or they rush to sort of job descriptions and things. And once you've defined your vision for marketing, the culture is a key point. So we worked with major advertiser, over 12,000 marketeers globally, and they came to us to rewrite all of their global processes to make them more sort of agile. And we did our initial interviews, and we've got a skills survey that we use which picks up on culture as well.
Hmm.
And we deployed these, and we just came back, it's like, we can write down a process, we can show it, and we can train it into the organization, but your culture's wrong. To be able to for you to move, with agility, there's a fear culture here, there's a blame culture here.
Wow.
We have to address this. So we were able to deploy uh, both face-to-face e-learning facilities and lots of cultural changes. We put the CMO in the middle of the marketing department rather than on 8 floors higher. We changed the meeting room environments. We banned a certain number of CCs so that people weren't getting copied. We changed the way the email was to be used. We introduced Teams. And then there was a whole bunch of training around risk aversion and failing fast and genuine agility. And the cultural piece landed very well, that allowed the process changes that we needed to make to land well. But I don't think it would have worked in an organization of that scale without the cultural shift that needed to be made. Right. So, uh, again, we understand marketing. It's different from some other departments in organizations. Culture applies to every department,
Yep.
but there's a strong sense of different types of marketing culture that need to be recognized and sometimes tweaked and enhanced.
Yeah, good for you. I love that. I think that's really an important piece that you feel inside a company that it may not work here the same way because our culture might be slightly different in some
Yeah.
way or another. Another thing that's happening, obviously, in the last couple of years because of retail media networks, when you start looking at people and roles and getting people in the right roles, is the lines are getting a bit blurred between a marketing side and the commerce side. And are you seeing yourself being pulled into the commercial sides of the house, sales and trade and such, in order to help sort how do these functions work in a much more integrated way?
Yeah. It is one of the big sort of three or four topics of the moment, right? When people come to us, as you said earlier, they come to us with a problem like either a marketing person comes to us or a salesperson says, "Hey, we've got to fix sort of our retail commerce sort of offering. Can you come and do org design for us?" That normally means in code is there's a punch up between sales and marketing over who owns shopper and
That's
retail
right.
marketing, right? And they're looking for someone independent to, adjudicate between two often warring factions. And we just start in a very different place, which is what's the customer experience that you're trying to build? What are you trying to offer the consumer? Now let's peel it back and look what skills that you need to deliver against that. Now let's look at what process needs to operate within that and the tech and the data. And then finally, what do you want to do in-house versus out of house with the agencies? By the time you peel back those different layers, you're almost left with a clearly defined answer for who should be doing sort of what, but driven by the consumer and the consumer experience that you want to create. I'll give you an example is,
Yeah.
let's just say you might be a retailer and you might want to do a lot of retail media, right? Big
Hmm.
topic. You want to pull in a lot of money. Well, it depends on who's got that handle. If it's the sales guys and they want to try and pull it in and just make a lot of money, that's one thing. If it's maybe the marketing side and they want to build a seamless customer experience for the consumer, it might be a completely different thing. So you have to start with what the vision is, what the objectives are, and the customer experience, and then work it back into the organization. And that'll dictate where some of the roles should do. But where isn't as important as the skills and the processes, irrespective, right? Org design is not as important as having a brilliant process so that people can build these great experiences.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like it's often much better to start with the process and what is you're trying to accomplish. What's the objective? And then you work your way through that to get to the other side of it. One of the things I'm hearing in the industry quite a bit, Simon, is the growing complexity of MarTech, AdTech, and how do you help marketers deal with that complexity? It's almost overwhelming. It can be. And if you look at the many different streams of knowledge from customer data platforms and what that might mean, all the way through to the MarTech and AdTech. Do you feel like we're at a point of overwhelm, or how are people coping with the demand
Well,
to develop skills in all those areas?
yeah, I mean, there's just a lot, right? I mean, everyone's seen the famous sort of charts of all of the ad and marketing technologies that exist, and that is completely overwhelming if you look at it in that way. There's no way that either our company or any company could hold expertise across a map and a vista like that, and it's sort of a fool's errand to try, Andy, right? But I
Mm,
think you can chunk things down in different ways by not looking at the technology. If you say, what are the biggest problems I need to solve? Okay. And you start
yep.
with, oh, is it targeting or is it loyalty or what is it? Right. And then you're saying, okay, what are the kind of the KPIs that are really important? Well, what's the data that I need within it? And then you get to, last of all, the technology that provides the data, that provides the answer to the biggest questions that you have as a marketeer. Whereas I think too many people start at the wrong place. The other thing is I would say is you have to be uh, cross-functionally agnostic or independent, by which I mean is if you've only got expertise in media, the answer is always a media piece of technology. If you're,
Mm,
a CRM expert, the
right.
answer is always a new, fantastic data warehouse, right? Where it is where I think you have to sit above that so you can find the connections between technologies and build these integrated technology solutions and stacks, as opposed to doing it piece by piece, department by department, because you never get a holistic view and it never joins together. Um, so that's just one other thing that we've noticed a lot is too many companies, um, put the budgets in the hands of too many peoples, and then it's trying to like knit spaghetti, right? You just
Yeah.
can't make it all work together at the end of the day.
Yeah, I saw a statistic the other day that only 30% of typical MarTech features are actually used of what's available there, which you could look at that one of two ways. One is maybe they should be used and the skills aren't there, or maybe that's all that's needed to achieve the objectives of what the
It's very
organization
true.
is trying to do, right? That so
Yeah, really true. It's a really great point. We've just done a huge project for a global beauty and cosmetic sort of company. And they had from memory, I may be wrong, but it's in the right ballpark of 286 different taxonomy fields on their digital asset management.
Good
system, and
grief.
they were like, "Wow, we're not really getting much traction. We can't find stuff on the dam. We're not using it right, and things like that." And so we had to come up with a new taxonomy that could also fit with their media taxonomy, their PIM taxonomy, and their finance taxonomy, so they could work out the ROI on the stuff that they were sort of making. I think we got it down to about 35 fields, and by able to getting it auto-filled and optimized by depending on what you filled in, we were able to, rationalize and improve the uses quite dramatically. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I've heard the quote, not everything that could be counted should be counted, and not everything that counts can be counted. So it's trying to sift through that. So important. Let's go to the second big P pillar, partners. There's a lot of talk in the industry more recently about the pitch process being broken. Um, I've seen that and I've gone through that process. You guys led us through that process. But I don't see any change really happening there to do it a different way. How do you think about the overall process of the agency beauty show and showing up and all of the work that goes into that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is a hot topic, especially amongst the agencies. I think the first thing is when someone comes and says we want to pitch, you go why, and then you do the classic Toyota five whys to get back to what the root cause is. And it might be because our sales are flat or something else, and the agency may not be actually the problem, or it may be much better to run a get fit exercise and fix it, as we did one once before with yourselves, than discarding the agency and doing a pitch. So that's the first point. The second thing is you've got to understand what you're running a pitch for. Are you trying to buy a capability that can do great work, or are you trying to get them to do a bit of work that can run at the end of it? And they're two fundamentally different approaches. We believe in the former, not the latter. And
Mm.
sometimes you get lucky and work comes out that runs, and that's fantastic, or a media strategy
Hmm.
or a PR strategy that sticks. But that's not ever our intention. Is to buy the human capability and technical competence of the agency that can do great work. And that leads you down a very different pitch path, Andy. I mean, we talk
Yeah.
about running high humanity pitches. I'd rather put your key account director in a room with you so you can have a one-on-one, so you can assess whether you can work with the lady or the guy. You can assess their general knowledge and their understanding of your business and your needs and their leadership ability. That's going to be far better for you and for them, and you're going to be able to give better feedback than a PowerPoint warfare and glitzy videos and things like that. So we tend to run high humanity pitches, which are much more intimate than some folk, for sure, and than is generally the case. Um, and we tend to do real deep dives on things like technology and stuff. Screen grabs of technology on PowerPoint doesn't work. We tend to roll up the sleeves, give them live tests, give them budgets to play with. And if we want to test an agency's ability to do things quick, we might throw in a last minute pitch,
Yeah.
idea just to see
Yeah.
how they can think and react and work to things. So it's much more of a live test of a working relationship than what used to be the siege mentality. Now, I have to say, there is a huge amount of the industry that doesn't work in that way. There are some poor procurement people in marketing teams, although marketing procurement's improved dramatically. And there are some pretty average pitch consultants who, used to be an account director in 1988 and,
Yeah.
are still running pitches in that way, right? I'm just
Yeah.
be blunt about it. So there is a need for change. We adopt what we think is best. But I think there is a lot of frustration, rightly, with the way that they're being run.
Yeah. I've participated as a client in both of those different approaches. And in the first approach of the traditional way of looking at, 7, 8 agencies or some ungodly number, there gets to be a blindness that happens where the
Mm.
pitch decks look a lot alike, and the real information to make a really great choice just isn't there. And then we've done it the other way, where through the more human approach, and I think if I remember right, you guys helped lead that process, and it does give you much richer information about how things really work, the real human side of it, and are you going to get along with these people? Do you respect the approach, and is there real dialogue and a willingness to pitch back, but push back? I always loved a partner that would actually, challenge and not be afraid of that, to share a different point of view. I thought that was really rich. You guys talk about procurement, which I think that's an area that is often inside of a brand or a retailer, can be almost, I don't want to say an enemy of the marketing department, right? As you're trying to go through this process, but I found that the procurement team became my best friend, really, in terms of working with them early, inviting them in, and helping them understand how fast the marketing world was changing, especially looking at what was happening with programmatic and all of the elements with that. Um, the foundational elements of procurement. How do you harmonize that so that it's, or any
Yeah.
suggestions on how procurement could play a much more collaborative role between marketing and the agency and everything else?
We contributed to and support the World Federation of Advertisers Project Spring, which I'd urge any sort of forward-thinking marketeer or marketing operations or indeed marketing procurement person to look at, which is moving procurement away from a transactionary, just cost focus into driving value into organizations. And some of the, best marketing procurement teams that we work with are bringing new initiatives. They're looking at what's the outcome of the work, not just the cost of it. And they're pushing for ROI on everything. And they're pushing the marketeers to be much more disciplined and measured about what they're doing. And they're improving the skills of the marketeers in topics like briefing and processes and things like that. One of our largest, probably our two of our five largest marketing projects, general projects, started from procurement, where there was a great relationships between marketing, procurement, and the CMO. We were introduced because we do things outside of procurement, can fix processes, can fix briefing programs, can do org design. So for one, we were introduced by marketing procurement. We created a new marketing operations function called MOMS, a new production operation inside marketing called POMS, put in place new technology and things like that. And that was driven by um, marketing procurement in really fantastic partnership with CMO, so that the marketers wouldn't have got there on their own. They had their head filled with plenty of other things, whereas the independence of marketing procurement um, really made the difference in that instance, and in several of the biggest assignments which we've been involved in.
Well, have you also worked with finance? Because I think one of the areas that I found challenging at times is the, helping educate finance on how measurement works and the different KPIs that are there. When I was a CMO at Walmart Asda, I'd have 20, 30 KPIs to be looking at, from how I was doing on brand attribution to cut through to salience, all kinds of KPIs. And you start adding the commercial side in with the retail media networks, it can be really difficult to know, you move one KPI one way and all of a sudden the other KPI goes the other direction, right? So simplifying that world, understanding that world, and really being able to be choiceful about what does move the needle for you in the right way, required a lot of work with the finance director, because they're measuring budgets, they're setting budgets, they need to approve budgets and make sense out of that. Have you dipped into the finance side in addition to the procurement side on measurement?
Yes, indeed. Driven from the marketing side, I've never been employed by a finance director directly yet, so I have to be clear on that. But we've just completed a project in the US. It was a large, iconic CPG company who had fantastic econometric modeling to show what was happening to their brands. They had all the brand tracking that showed that when you invest, the scores go up, and every year their marketing budgets got cut and they were going sort of down. And so as a result, actually, equity and things were sort of falling.
Mhm.
And we had to go upstairs from the CMO to the CEO to agree a project that was going to look at marketing effectiveness, the skills internally, okay, what was actually happening, and then look across the measures and get them validated independently that they were true, responsible, and that they were forward sort of thinking. And we had to take finance on that journey with us, because there was no point in us saying, yes, this effectiveness approach is the best way of measuring brands and stuff, as if at the rest of the time, finance director couldn't do it, right? The other thing is I would urge all CMOs or even department heads to think about is how you create budget liquidity, because
Mm,
very often budgets are set by department, often on an annual basis, often based on a year-on-year sort of calculation, which gives you no liquidity to be able to react and move between departments and shift budgets sort of around. So not just having the measures to be able to do it, but having the facility with finance to either hold budget topside, so it can be injected where it's sort of left, or the ability to sort of move money between departments with the agility that modern marketing needs. So finance again can be a great ally, but sometimes you need that independence outside of just the marketing director telling you that the results are great, to be able to do it, and that takes some winning over.
yeah, it does take some winning over. I know when we brought in market mix modeling for the first time and we had the data and started to do it, finance was a bit skeptical, to be honest. And we kind of did a two steps forward, three steps back to go and re-educate and really kind of co-create together with finance and procurement and marketing. So that three-legged stool was the only way we could really get there. And then once
Yeah.
we created that collaboration, it really did change the outcome of what we
Yeah.
were able to do by having that. The last
And the
piece,
ability to
yeah, go
test
ahead.
now, the ability to best test, Andy, is better
Yeah,
than it's ever been, right? And
yeah,
yet so few people have got a really rigorous, test and learn sort of program with controls and things like that. So one of our large auto clients had 164 tests that they were running on an annual basis, 164
wow.
tests to be able to prove different types of effectiveness. Not all of them linked to sort of budget, okay, but a lot of them, of course, showed that they were optimizing the budget or that they needed more budget to do different sort of things. And a commitment to that level of rigor, sometimes marketeers don't have, right? It
Yeah.
feels like more engineering, it feels more science than art. But again, with the ability to measure, testing is your best friend.
Yeah, 100%, especially in this dynamic time, which leads me to the last of the P's, the process. When you look at process, and I just had this question asked me the other day of when do you pour down and lay down a repeatable process to roll out because you need to scale, right? So you're in a marketing team, whether you're in an agency or a marketer, and you're wanting to create some scale and efficiency, you need to document and have playbooks and be able to uh, run consistent processes. But at the same time, everything's changing all the time. And you want to be innovating, you want to learn something new. As soon as you lay down a process, it can go stale and you can miss out on the innovation. So, how do you coach people through that tension, that paradox between innovation and process for efficiency?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I mean, first of all, I'd say that most marketeers think that process is a very dirty word, and they
Yep.
don't give it the value that it genuinely has. The second is in many organizations, the process isn't someone's full-time job, right? Many companies now have put in place marketing operations teams, but many haven't, and someone really needs to continue to do it. But in direct answer to your question is you build it in, right? You build innovation and creativity in the process, and you know when to unprocess. I'll give you an example that we built for a large global auto client, their new annual planning and campaign sort of processes. And within that, there's very clear places where you are prescribed to innovate, or certain categories of campaign or activity which are innovation led, right? So you're building it in. It's not like you either do the process or you innovate. The innovations sort of built in. The other thing there will be exceptions to the process, and you have to have a means of dealing with that rather than everyone just calling an exception and no one knowing what to do. So in the old days, you would have like what I used to call in one of my agencies a red brief. A red brief was something where all rules were torn up and you just approached it afresh and tackled things in a different way, which might mean you lock yourself away in a house for 4 days with pizza and beer until you come out with the answer. It might be you take everyone for a run around the park to get to the answer, might be whatever it might need to be. But you unprocess to be able to solve certain sort of tasks. And I think a lot of marketeers have, forgotten that. They come to us saying, oh, we've got to work in agile squads. We've got to do agile marketing, which we happily put in the discipline and the rigor of the stand-ups and the Kanban boards and all of those sort of things. But there are exceptions to that when you need to step outside it and you need to have a means or a way to sort of do it. So
Yeah.
unprocessing is as important as processing.
Yeah, I stood up two different marketing ops, one at Walmart and one in Asda, where there wasn't a marketing ops before. It was done through traditional project management kind of stuff. And I can tell you, it really was a game changer. But a couple of things I learned through that process is one, if you're going to add a next step, right? So you see a mistake happen, we add another step to the process, right? That's how they get bloated really fast. And so my thing is, if you're going to add something to the process, something needs to come out and try to force a bit of a simplicity because they by themselves they will get complex and more so than they need to be. And the second thing is if you want to have a playbook or a work process defined and then you put that out there and you call it success for a marketing ops team to have a process, that's not really success. Success should be measured if by asking the question, are the customers of this process using it and are they happy with it and does it make their life better? Until you get to that point, just having a playbook is not an outcome. That's just, ticking a box to say we have a process for this and a process for that. The measurement should be, is it effective and does it make my life better?
Yeah, 100%. And as we say, it has to be built for the real world with, and maintained. So you're going to have 30% churn, okay, in your
Yep.
team. So just having a playbook means nothing unless you're onboarding people, continually training people on it, adapting it, bringing their knowledge and insight in from the organization. It has to be a live, living thing, not some monolithic piece. And as we say, is the ability to know how to short circuit it when you need to is like, one of the ones we've built for a large quick service restaurant operated at 3 different speeds. So,
Mm,
you could go through it really quick, you could go through it in a middle way, or you could go through it a heavy way, depending on what the business demanded at the time. And different pieces are grayed out and different races change and things like that. It
you just
included me
yeah.
having to tell us, it included me having to tell a CMO that they weren't going to see the work
Mm,
for some of these speeds because they just couldn't get across it, to approve everything, right? Which they felt uncomfortable about, but that's what the good process necessitated.
yeah. And it can work inside across the agency client side too. One of the things that I really encouraged was asking the agency to not bring 6 or 7 ideas in the first look at it, a new campaign, but come with the idea that you believe in most, and we'll talk through it. And if we need to go to a second or third idea, then you know we can. But I prefer to, because you're the agency, you're the expert, and boy, did that change things because that change in process allowed them to simplify and have more confidence than just having 4 or 5 ideas because in case one fails, right? You would have a backup, and I just think it created a lot more efficiency for both sides. Let me
Yeah, you
talk.
make a
Yeah,
great
go ahead.
point about the agencies, Andy. I think
Yeah,
getting the agencies to match a client's process is really important. There's no point having a client process, but then the agency goes off and does something else, and they can't work to the same level of agility, or they're not synchronized into those races and those ways. So, again, for the large auto, when we did the trainers was 100 people, everyone in Detroit for a train the trainers sort of session, of which half were agencies and half were the marketeers, to make sure that the whole marketing machine moved at the same speed and the same pace with the same agility, as opposed to, different speeds and different angles.
yeah, yeah. That's so critical. 100% agree. We have a lot of students we work with the University of Arkansas and other places. I'd love to hear your thoughts on career advice to graduates going into the workforce. How do you how does should they think about this complex, multivariated space and what they should be thinking about to build a career? What would you give? Kind of advice would you give them today?
It's funny, I did a talk at the University of Exeter in the UK the other day to some students about a similar topic. And I said, first of all, is, you know, find out about all of the different disciplines that exist within sort of marketing, and look at your own sort of skill sets very, very closely, because you could be a real numbers person and succeed brilliantly in marketing. You could be a creative, flair-driven person, succeed in marketing, because it's such a broad church of sort of skills. But one, know yourself very well, and the other is know the context that you like to work. If you're a sports nut and you're a, let's be honest, a real geeky, nerdy data guy,
Yeah.
look at that. There's so many fantastic opportunities in that sort of field. Why go and do a grad scheme, and a general CPG? So I'd aim for the sweet spot of where you think you're going to succeed ultimately, and in the right place. The second thing is, if you're listening to this podcast, you're doing the right thing,
Mhm.
which is to learn broadly and deeply. There's a lot of great material to read and to access and to gen up with before you go for an interview or before you apply for a role or think about it. Just really put in the spade work to do that. It's not going to find you. The last point I would talk about is pick your boss.
Hmm.
Okay, go and find the people on LinkedIn that are doing things, that are shaking things in the sector that you've chosen. Engage with them, write to them, try and find someone that is doing the best sort of work, hustle.
I love that. I'd also add to that, once you do make a choice and you've entered, there is no perfect job. So I would relax on that pressure point. And I would also give myself at least a year. Personally, I say 2 years to not look up and second guess, because
Yeah.
you're going to go through some hard stuff, and that's part of the learning. And it's easy today to say, "Yeah, I don't like. I'm not passionate about this. I'm going to give up. Change careers, do whatever." But some of the best learning happens when you're going through the hard things that you have to learn and go through. So yeah,
And
just give
it's
yourself some
it's
time.
still the most it's still the most invigorating sort of thing. Not everyone does a marketing degree, and that's what makes marketing fantastic. You'll meet geographers, you'll meet scientists, sports scientists, creatives. It's a melting pot of skills and disciplines, and it's incredibly meritocratic. You're not waiting for your next exam. You don't have to go through 10 layers. If you're good, you'll fly, and you
Yeah.
can get to the level that you've got to, or possibly even, my own lower, more humble role in the world, but you can certainly achieve. If you apply yourself and you've got the right skills and you can work as a team fantastically. I mean, marketing is still, as I think a lot of people that have gone into tech companies are now finding out, there's a real benefit to being in the department of a leading company in marketing.
I also think that we do not have in the industry today an abundance of leaders. It feels like there's a leadership deficit, and just because of how things have grown, and it's an opportunity to really apply yourself. And if you do have ambition to be a senior leader, and you put the work in, it's not like we've got too many leaders.
It's a fantastic observation. I think for many of the people who may be listening to this who are mid-ranking marketeers, learn how to lead. It doesn't tend to be taught in marketing as it maybe is in some other functions. You don't just emerge as a leader, and there's a difference between being a leader and having followers. So build your followership, work out how you can get followers, because that's the sort of discipline that you are in marketing. It's not command and control. If you don't have followers, then you're doomed in marketing, I would
Yeah.
say. Hierarchy will not save you.
No, you get sponsors that change, and I think the only one of the only reasons I lasted 4 years in the CMO job at ASDA was the trying to build networks and relationships at the leadership level, because you do have to work in a world of influence. You have to work with merchants, and you have to work with operations. You work well with your agency partners, and finding people that have those leadership skills that work through influence, as you mentioned, is not easy to find sometimes. And I think it makes a wide open space for those that want to advance a career. This is a great place to be.
Yeah, very, very, very true.
Simon, as you look out the next couple of years, as we wrap this up, what do you see is excites you, and what gives you hope as you look in this very VUCA complicated world?
Yeah, there's so much. I'm tremendously excited about the role of marketing with regards to sustainability. And when I mean sustainability, I mean it in the broadest sense of the word. I don't just mean like carbon.
Hmm.
I'm talking about biodiversity. I'm talking about diversity and inclusivity. I'm talking about the power of brands to shape um, humanity, and 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 I think marketing's got so much more to play than perhaps manufacturing or production and some of those other areas where a lot of these conversations have started actually. And I think as soon as people really wake up to the power of marketing to shape society and the world at large, I think that's going to be a fantastic thing. So I'm tremendously excited about that. I'm someone who's tremendously excited about artificial intelligence and the ability to harness it for good, and the ability to use it in a smart way. I know a lot of people are terrified that it's going to put art directors out of work or media strategists out of work, or that everything's going to get dumbed down and the answer's all going to be the same because it's run through ChatGPT. I
Right.
think it's utter hogwash, right? I just think they're going to be the smart leaders that really look at it and say, how can it help me solve these critical problems, right? Look at the people, the organization, the agency resources, the technology that they're going to need to put in place to harness the power of AI, and then test and test and test and lay out these programs. They're going to win big, because other ones who just put their fingers in their ears, it's a bad place to be over the next few years, I think. So
No.
yeah, lots of things with those. And then lastly, the power of creativity, I feel, is we've had a decade of data and tech. And whilst I've just talked about AI, that's a servant to creativity, not a replacement for it. So I'm excited a bit about creative renaissance. As brands have to find growth, creativity is the force that gives it creativity and innovation. So three things really, Andy, I'd say, which always excite me, but for those specifically at the moment.
Well, it's interesting. There's probably a lot of data to back up the importance of creativity. If you look at the cookie apocalypse that may be coming and contextual being more important, understanding how message works and creativity, it feels like it's taken a bit of a back seat to the performance marketing conversations over the last couple of years. And I'm with you on that. I think for that reason alone, we need to put more energy into the creative side of it. So, hey, Simon, thank you so much for taking this time out of your day and spending it with me on these very important topics. I've covered a lot in the space of retail media networks and the changes that are happening in that space, but this is the first we could sit down and talk about, what's important in changing, an organization inside to prepare for those kind of changes or to maximize them. I think you've done a good job of outlining uh, how you have to look at people, how you have to look at the process, the partners, and the procurement in a holistic way. And I'm not trying to flock per se, but I think anybody that thinks that way as a client or a brand marketer is going to find much more success than taking it more one-dimensionally as a organizational design problem alone. So thank you for spending that time and bringing that clarity. For those listening, we'll put in the show notes how you can get in touch with Simon and connect up with him and find out more about what he's doing.
Andy, thanks so much for your time and inviting me, and thank you to anyone who's listened to the end.
That's it for this episode of It's a Customer's World. If you found this helpful and entertaining, I would be so grateful if you could share our show with your friends, and I'd be super happy if you subscribe so you can be updated as we publish new episodes. And if you really want to help, leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen. It's a Customer's World podcast is a product of the University of Arkansas's Customer-Centric Leadership Initiative and a Walton College original production.